What is going on, you guys, and welcome back to another video. My name is Austin James Jackson, professional landscape photographer out here in the beautiful Death Valley National Park today. Today we're talking about my favorite 2-lens setup for Sony shooters. Now, I've been shooting Sony for quite some time now. I've played with a bunch of different wide angles, a bunch of different telephotos, and I've gotten to get my hands on so much gear to make this guide today, where I'm talking about, after all these years of shooting, all these years of trying things, the 2 best lenses I think that you can use if you're a Sony shooter that likes to shoot outdoors, landscapes, travel, anything like that. These 2 lenses are going to be the go-to for you to get, and let me convince you why. Now, first and foremost, let's talk about the ultra wide angle lens. This is a staple for landscape photographers, for travel photographers, for anyone that needs to capture the grand scene in front of them. This is something you got to have in your bag if you're a landscape photographer, and there is quite a few on the market for Sony, between primes, zooms, ones with really wide maximum apertures, ones with not so wide maximum apertures. So I've gotten the chance to test so many different ones of these wide angle lenses, and this is ultimately the lens that I think is the absolute best. Now, this one in my hands here is the Sony 16-25 f2.8. I believe this came out last fall, in the fall of 2024, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a lot of things that I like about this lens. Now, traditionally, we've heard landscape and travel photographers talk about using the holy trinity of lenses, which includes the 16-35 f2.8. All the major brands make that 16-35 f2.8. But I do like this 16-25 a little bit better. And yes, it has 10 less millimeters of range on the long end, but it is so much smaller and it's so much cheaper. So I used to have a 16-35 f2.8, and it was pretty heavy, a lot heavier than this one. And I was just finding that I was never going past 22-24 millimeters, so I didn't need that extra range. So I decided to pick up this lens, do some sharpness tests, all that good stuff. I didn't find any sharpness difference between this 16-25 and the Sony 16-35 f2.8. Because this is also an f2.8 lens, you don't lose any aperture that you would get on that G Master lens. So this 16-25 2.8 is great. I like it because it goes all the way out to 16. The other option, the lens that I used to shoot with, was a Tamron 17-28. Now, this was a great lens, f2.8 as well, a little bit cheaper than this one, and it was about the same weight. But the thing that I like better about this one is that it goes all the way out to 16. Now, the difference between 16 and 17 might not sound like a lot, but trust me, guys, it is. Having something that goes out to 16 is huge, so much better than 17. It's just a little bit, but for those ultra wide landscape shots where you want to get something nice and beautiful in the foreground, that's going to make a huge difference. Because this is f2.8, so wide angle, it's great for nightscapes as well. Maybe not as great as a 1.8 or 1.4 prime, but it definitely gets the job done. I use this all the time for nightscapes. I love how it looks for astro photos. There's not a lot of chroma distortion and other distortions that you get when shooting the stars, so it's a great lens for that as well. Would highly recommend picking it up. I love having gear that's both lightweight and versatile, and this is certainly that. Now, when we look at the weight comparison, this one comes in right about 14.5 ounces. The Tamron 17-28 is just a little bit heavier. It's about 15 ounces. But this is 10 ounces lighter than the 24-ounce 16-35 f2.8. For me, as a landscape photographer that does a lot of hiking, that makes a huge difference for me. That's 10 ounces less that I don't need to have on my back for a lens that can basically do all the same things, because like I said, I'm generally not zooming in too much further. Now, the price point on this right now is $11.99. A little expensive for a lens, but nowhere near the price of the G Master lens. It's a little bit more expensive than the Tamron lens, but I do think it's well worth it for that extra 1 millimeter on the wide end and just a little bit lighter weight. So this is definitely my favorite wide angle lens, that ultra wide angle lens rather, that I have tried throughout all my years of shooting Sony. The 16-25 G lens f2.8. This thing is amazing. Throw a link down below if you want to pick this thing up. All right, now let's talk about the second lens here that you absolutely need to have in your kit as a travel or landscape photographer, and that is the telephoto lens without the hood on. Looks like this. Now, this is a 70-300 made by Tamron. It's an f4.5 to 6.3. Really nice lens that comes at a great price point. I'm huge on price. I love things that aren't too expensive. These off-brand lenses generally are a little bit cheaper. This one is well worth it. This one just came out, I believe, in the last year or year and a half, maybe 2 years. But it is newer than the other option you have for 70-300, which is the Sony 70-300. Now that lens is about double the price of this one at about $1,200. This one's about $550. And it's also about 30 ounces. This one's about 19. So it is nearly twice as heavy if you're gonna go with the Sony. So I do like the Tamron. Now the one thing that you lose out on the Tamron compared to the Sony is on the longer end. So this is a f4.5 to 6.3. The Sony is a 5.6 at that 300mm end. However, since I'm using this for landscapes, I'm not using this for wildlife, I don't find the aperture matters that much. I'm usually at f8, f9, f10, 11, any of those. I'm usually not all the way wide open, so I don't care too much about the aperture, and I'm happy to get the weight savings. This lens also doesn't have all of the buttons on the outside that the Sony has, but I don't really find it necessary. I don't mind tabbing into my camera to go to manual focus or to turn off image stabilization or anything like that. So this one is kind of bare bones on the outside, but that helps to save the weight. But this is a great lens, super compact for a telephoto. That 70 to 300 range covers pretty much everything I need. If you want anything further than 300mm, you are looking at both a heftier price tag and a heftier weight on your back. So for that reason, I really like this 70 to 300 because it gets me pretty much everything that I need. Now, of course, the Sony 70 to 200 might offer a little bit better image quality. It offers, you know, an f2.8 aperture or f4 if you get the f4 version. But I like the extra 100mm of range that this thing offers, plus the price, plus the weight is so much lighter. And when I compared this 70 to 300 with my Sony 70 to 300 before I got rid of it, I found that the image quality was quite comparable. They were pretty much the exact same. I couldn't find one lens that performed better than the other. So for that reason, it was a no-brainer for me to switch to this lens, save 10 or 11 ounces, save, you know, $650 on the lens. And so for that reason, this was a fan favorite for me. Now, I use this thing all the time. Honestly, this is usually what I'm shooting most of my landscapes on. I love to shoot with the wide angle lens, but the telephoto lens just makes so much more sense a lot of times when the conditions are a little tougher outside, when you don't have those crazy beautiful skies. A lot of times I look to this telephoto to capture some of the finer details in the scene. I think it's a must-have for landscape photographers. Definitely want to pick one of these telephoto lenses up. And at the price point that this lens is at and the weight, it's really a no-brainer if you don't have a telephoto lens to grab one of these. Now, truly, you put these two lenses together and you've got yourself a landscape photography kit, as long as you got the camera as well. This is really all you need. I know a lot of you might be thinking, what about the range between 25mm and 70mm that we don't have covered? Now, generally, I'm finding myself pretty much always not wanting to shoot at that focal range. I used to have a 28 to 75 Tamron lens that I got rid of. I was just using it for video. I had it for photo. I threw it on my lens sometimes, and I never liked the photos that I was able to get with it. That mid-range is just not the most spectacular focal length. It offers kind of a true to what your eye actually sees focal length. They say the eye sees somewhere between 30 and 60mm, but that's not really gonna provide the most flattering angles of the landscape. I'm trying to provide angles that maybe you wouldn't see with your eye normally. And so for that reason, I'm always using the wide or the telephoto, not using anything in between. If you want something in between, there's plenty of great mid-range options. I would just get like a 40 or 50mm prime lens. That's nice and light. You can add to your kit as well. But truly, these should be the only two lenses that you need for most travel, outdoor, landscape, anything like that. Now, when you combine the price of these two lenses, you're left with something around $1,500. I know that maybe that sounds like a lot, but if you've been in the lens market for long, you know $1,500 for two lenses for literally your whole kit is not a lot. It's a great price, great weight. These things both are super lightweight. You can hardly feel them in your pack compared to some of the other camera gear that I've carried in the past. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense to go with these two lenses. Now, if you're a Sony shooter, you have lenses that you like, mention them down below in the comments. I'll definitely give them a try. I've tried most everything that's on the market today that would work good for landscape shooters. But leave your comments anyways. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear what you're shooting with, and I would definitely try things out. But these are two great lenses. I'm gonna link them down below. The Sony 16 to 25 f2.8 and the Tamron 70 to 300 f4.5 to 6.3. Well worth the money if you're looking for a setup for full frame or even for crop sensor. You just wanna get full frame lenses so that you can transform into that full frame camera later. Either way, two great choices of lenses here. And I think they are well worth a pickup. Check out the links down below if you're gonna pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Austin James Jackson. We'll see you guys next time.